Welcome to Vows Burn, home of shocking revenge stories, family betrayals, and secrets that will keep you on the edge of your seat. I always thought family meant loyalty. That meant fairness. That meant love. But I learned the hard way that sometimes family means betrayal. My name is Maddie Harper, and for years I watched my parents pour everything into my brother Ethan, the so-called golden child. While I studied, worked hard, and saved every penny, Ethan charmed everyone, took reckless risks, and spent without consequence. And somehow it was always forgiven. It all came to a head last summer at the Harper Vineyard in Napa Valley. The vineyard had been in our family for generations, a legacy built on sweat, patience, and care. And Ethan had been running it like a casino. The numbers didn't add up. Vines were neglected. Investments disappeared. Employees were quitting. And yet, every time I tried to bring it up, my parents would shrug it off. Ethan knows what he's doing, Dad would say. He's the golden child. Just trust him, trust him. I wanted to scream. I had been the one keeping my own life together, juggling work, bills, and dreams, while Ethan's charm opened every door. My parents didn't see the warnings, didn't notice the warning signs. They only saw him smiling, handing out wine tastings like trophies, pretending to be perfect. Then came the day they asked me for money. I had just finished a week of double shifts at the law office I worked at in San Francisco, saving for my own dreams when Dad called me. His voice was unusually serious. "Maddie, we need your help," he said. "Ethan has run the vineyard into serious debt. We need $100,000 to keep it afloat." I remember laughing, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. "You want me to bail him out? After years of favoring him over me? After years of ignoring every warning I tried to give?" My hands shook. My stomach churned. I wanted to hang up. But instead, I said nothing and listened as Dad continued, trying to guilt me into feeling responsible for the mess I had no part in creating. That night, I drove up to the vineyard. The sunset over the rows of grapevines should have been beautiful, serene, peaceful, but I saw it differently now. I saw neglect. I saw recklessness. I saw money wasted and a legacy almost destroyed. And I saw Ethan, laughing and talking to the vineyard staff, completely unaware that his golden halo was cracking. I decided then, I couldn't just hand over money. I couldn't sit back while the family legacy crumbled because of favoritism. I needed the truth. I needed evidence. I needed to protect what was ours and finally, to show my parents the reality they had been too blinded to see. The first place I looked was the office Ethan had been managing. It was a mess of invoices, bills, spreadsheets, and empty promises. I started piecing everything together. Mismanaged funds, missing receipts, suspicious transfers. It was worse than I imagined. But buried in one dusty filing cabinet, I found something that made my blood run cold, and at the same time, gave me a glimmer of hope. Hidden beneath old contracts and forgotten receipts was a small, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't signed, but it had detailed entries. Ethan's own notes about loans he had taken, money he had diverted, lies he had told employees, even bribes he had made to smooth things over. My hand shook as I flipped through it. This was my proof. This was the evidence I needed to fight back, not just for the vineyard, but for myself. I realized then that my fight wasn't just about money or business. It was about justice, fairness, and finally being seen. For years, I had been invisible, the hard-working sibling, the one ignored, dismissed, overlooked. But no more. I was going to show my parents, show Ethan, show everyone that I wasn't weak, that I had the brains, the courage, and the proof to turn the tables. As I left the vineyard that night, the notebook clutched tightly to my chest. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and exhilaration. I was about to enter a battle I had been forced into by their favoritism, but this time I had a weapon. The next steps would be dangerous. I had to plan carefully, gather allies, and make sure that when the truth came out, it hit hard. Ethan might think he was untouchable. My parents might think they could still protect him. But I had the truth. And the truth has a way of coming out, whether people are ready for it or not. I wasn't just going to save the vineyard. I was going to reclaim my family's respect. And maybe, just maybe, teach the golden child a lesson he would never forget. I couldn't sleep that night. The leather-bound notebook burned in my mind like it carried not just facts, but a roadmap to exposing everything. Every line, every scribbled note about diverted funds, unpaid workers, and loans taken without approval, it all screamed arrogance, recklessness, and entitlement. Ethan had no idea I had found it. And if I played this right, he never would. The next morning, I started quietly. First, I checked the vineyard's financial records. Every bank statement, invoice, and ledger confirmed what I had read in the notebook. There were gaps, missing funds, suspicious transactions, all traced back to Ethan's personal accounts. I documented everything, taking photos, scanning pages, and creating a timeline. Each revelation fueled a fire inside me. This wasn't just about the vineyard anymore. It was about finally standing up to the golden child who had been favored at my expense for so long. I knew I couldn't do this alone. My cousin Natalie, who had always been quietly observant, was the first person I confided in. She had noticed Ethan's mismanagement too, had seen employees whispering about unpaid wages, contracts that didn't make sense, and the vineyard slowly deteriorating under his care. I shared what I had found, and her eyes widened. "Maddie, this is huge. We can't let them keep pretending everything is fine," she whispered. We started forming a plan. Natalie would discreetly gather testimonies from vineyard staff who had been too scared to speak. I would organize the evidence, financials, the notebook, and emails Ethan had sent. The idea wasn't just to confront him, it was to make it undeniable. No excuses, no charm, no manipulation. Just facts. Solid, undeniable proof. Meanwhile, Ethan remained blissfully unaware. He continued his routines, charming visitors at wine tastings, posting flashy photos of the vineyard's success on social media. I watched it all quietly, making notes, cross-checking discrepancies. Every smile he threw, every toast he made, it all felt like a challenge now. He thought he was untouchable. I was about to prove he was not. Tensions at home were subtle but palpable. My parents continued to praise Ethan for minor accomplishments while ignoring the warning signs I tried to voice. I realized quickly that guilt or anger wouldn't convince them. Only proof would. They had favored him for so long that logic alone couldn't pierce their blindness. I had to be strategic, precise, and careful. One afternoon, as I reviewed another stack of invoices in the vineyard office, Ethan walked in. He was casual, smiling, and completely unaware that I held the notebook in my bag. "Morning, Maddie." "Looking busy," he said. I forced a smile, hiding the storm inside. "Just going over the numbers," I replied lightly. I didn't let him see the spark of confrontation forming in my mind. Not yet. I realized I needed someone neutral to help me navigate this. That's when I reached out to Jonathan Pierce, our family lawyer. He had always been fair, and I trusted him more than anyone else. I arranged a private meeting showing him the notebook, the financial evidence, and employee testimonies I had begun collecting. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he studied everything. "Maddie, this is serious. If Ethan's been doing this, there's no way your parents can ignore it once they see it." His voice was calm, but the weight of his words hit me like a hammer. We began preparing for confrontation. Step by step, we organized everything: evidence, witnesses, timelines. My plan was simple: expose Ethan's mismanagement with facts and testimony so undeniable that even my parents couldn't defend him. And while the goal was justice, I knew the emotional stakes were higher. This was personal. It was about fairness, recognition, and reclaiming what was rightfully ours. Days turned into weeks as I built the case quietly. Natalie continued talking to staff, collecting their experiences without tipping Ethan off. I analyzed every bank transfer, every email, every note Ethan had written. Each piece strengthened the narrative. The golden child was not perfect. He was reckless, greedy, and dangerous for the vineyard's future. Then came the moment that changed everything. While reviewing an old shipment log, I discovered a forged contract Ethan had created. diverting funds to a personal account in another state. It was bold, audacious, and undeniable. My pulse raced. This was the key. This was the evidence that could finally tip the scales. That night, I placed the notebook and all evidence in a secure folder. I couldn't relax, couldn't stop thinking about what would happen when Ethan realized I had discovered the truth. I knew he would try to manipulate, to charm, to gaslight, but this time, I had the upper hand. As I looked out over the vineyard, the moonlight reflecting on the grapevines, I realized one thing. The battle wasn't just about money or the vineyard anymore. It was about reclaiming respect, exposing lies, and ensuring that Ethan and my parents understood that favoritism has limits, and I was ready to fight. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks, months really. Every late night, every careful note, every whispered conversation with Natalie and Jonathan had led up to it. Ethan had no idea I was about to strike, and I planned to make the truth hit like a thunderclap. It started with a simple question during one of our family dinners at the vineyard. I asked calmly, "Dad, have you seen these financial statements?" I placed a printed copy of the forged contract and other discrepancies in front of him. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan froze mid-bite, his fork hanging in the air like a cartoon character caught in slow motion. Those numbers don't make sense," Dad stammered, scanning the pages. His eyes flicked nervously toward Ethan, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in my father's face. I had spent years being dismissed, overlooked, ignored, but now he was the one realizing the gravity of what had been happening under his nose. Ethan's voice broke the tension. "Maddie, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like." He tried to charm me, to gaslight me, but I had prepared for this. "Actually, Ethan," I said slowly, "it's exactly what it looks like. And there's more." I pulled out the notebook, carefully documenting every loan, every diversion of funds, every bribe. Natalie had collected statements from employees who had quit or been threatened. Jonathan Pierce had verified everything, preparing us for a confrontation my parents couldn't ignore. I laid it all out piece by piece, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument could. Ethan's confident smirk faltered. He tried to interrupt, tried to explain, tried to charm, but with every page I revealed, the web of lies unraveled. My parents looked on, shock and disbelief etched into their faces. For years, they had ignored my concerns, dismissed my warnings, and praised Ethan's every move. Now the truth couldn't be ignored. By the time I finished, Ethan was pale, stammering, and clearly panicked. "Maddie, you don't understand." I cut him off. "I understand perfectly. You've gambled with our family's legacy, lied to employees, and put the vineyard at risk. And you thought no one would notice." The weight of the moment was intense. My parents, usually so blind to Ethan's flaws, were seeing him clearly for the first time. I could see the realization hit Dad's eyes. He had been favoring the wrong child. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she held her forehead, guilt and shock mixing in a way I had never seen before. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence was enough. The proof was enough. Ethan's own arrogance and carelessness had done what I could never have achieved by yelling or pleading. He had written his own confession across pages, spreadsheets, and employee statements. Then came the hardest part, deciding what to do next. I knew my goal wasn't just to punish Ethan. I wanted him to learn, to face consequences, and for the family to understand what favoritism had cost us. I turned to Jonathan, who gave me a small, reassuring nod. He had a plan for how we could formalize everything legally, ensure the vineyard was protected, and prevent Ethan from manipulating anyone again. The confrontation continued over several days. Employees gave statements, contracts were verified, and every lie Ethan had told was exposed. My parents, once blinded by favoritism, had to reckon with their mistakes. And Ethan, well, he realized too late that charm, charisma, and being the golden child couldn't protect him from the truth. By the end of it, the vineyard was secure, not fully healed, but protected. My parents began to understand the real work, effort, and vigilance I had always contributed. Ethan was humbled, angry, and embarrassed, forced to accept responsibility for his recklessness. And I felt a mixture of triumph, exhaustion, and cautious relief. That night, I walked through the vineyard alone. The rows of grapevines glistened under the moonlight, serene and silent. I had won, but the battle had changed me. I wasn't just Maddie, the overlooked sibling. I was Maddie Harper, the one who had seen the truth, gathered the evidence, and ensured justice was served. And as I looked at the moonlit vines, I knew this was just the beginning. The family would never forget this. Favoritism would never again blind them. And the golden child would carry the lessons of arrogance and deceit for the rest of his life. The days after the confrontation were surreal. My parents weren't angry at me. They were just quiet, shocked, maybe even ashamed. Ethan, on the other hand, avoided me like the plague, or worse, tried to act normal while clearly simmering inside. It was strange to watch him squirm, the golden child reduced to someone who couldn't hide his guilt, arrogance stripped away. I spent those mornings walking through the vineyard, checking every corner, making sure nothing had been damaged or mismanaged beyond repair. The vines were still alive, thriving even, but the infrastructure had been neglected. It was going to take work, real work. Not charm, not charisma, but effort and attention. I rolled up my sleeves and got started, and I realized something. This wasn't just about proving Ethan wrong. It was about showing my parents what leadership, responsibility, and dedication truly meant. Natalie became my right hand during this phase. She helped organize the staff, reconcile payroll, and rebuild relationships that Ethan had damaged with his recklessness. Slowly but surely, the vineyard began to regain its rhythm. Workers who had been scared or frustrated returned, impressed by my ability to step in and handle what Ethan had ruined. For the first time, I felt the weight of being respected, not just tolerated. Ethan tried small, manipulative attempts, compliments, half-hearted apologies, even subtle blame-shifting, but I had learned. I didn't engage. I let the evidence speak for itself, and I let him drown in his own mistakes. Every time he tried to charm an employee or parent, the notebook, spreadsheets, and testimonies loomed in my mind. I didn't have to say a word. His arrogance had been undone by facts. My parents, once blind to favoritism, began to see the vineyard differently. Dad started asking for my advice. Elizabeth began checking with me before making decisions, and for the first time, I felt like my contributions mattered. Not because Ethan had been exposed, but because I had earned it. Every late night, every calculation, every careful step I had taken to protect the vineyard now mattered. And yet, there was still tension. Ethan refused to fully apologize. He gritted his teeth, avoided eye contact, and sometimes whispered behind my back. I knew this wouldn't end overnight. But for the first time, I felt in control. I wasn't just reacting, I was leading, protecting, and shaping the family legacy that had almost been destroyed. One evening, after a long day of overseeing the harvest, I sat on the porch overlooking the vineyard. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and purple, and for the first time, I felt calm. Natalie joined me sipping iced tea. "You know, Maddie," she said quietly, "this isn't just about exposing Ethan. You've changed the whole dynamic here. People respect you now." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. "I know, but it's not over," I admitted. "He's still in the house. He still thinks he can charm his way out of anything. I need to make sure he never forgets the lessons he's learned." Over the next weeks, I carefully monitored every aspect of the vineyard and Ethan's behavior. I implemented stricter financial oversight, required signed reports, and involved Jonathan Pierce whenever questions arose. Ethan tried a few small schemes, but each one was caught before it could cause damage. It was poetic justice. The golden child's arrogance finally met with consequence. Finally, one evening, after months of careful planning, confrontation, and oversight, I called a family meeting. Dad, Mom, Ethan, and even some senior vineyard staff gathered. I laid out the vineyard's current status, detailed the corrections we had made, and highlighted every step taken to repair Ethan's damage. And then quietly but firmly I said, "Ethan, this is your chance. Own your mistakes or step aside and let the vineyard run properly." Ethan's face went pale. For the first time, he was silent, unsure. He looked at my parents, seeking support, but they were nodding at me. Their eyes held pride, respect, and a quiet acknowledgement of the truth. Ethan realized finally that charm, manipulation, and favoritism no longer worked. He had lost his golden child immunity. Walking back to my room that night, I felt a sense of closure. The vineyard was safe, the family dynamic had shifted, and Ethan had been humbled. But more than anything, I felt seen, respected, and in control. I hadn't just fought for the vineyard, I had fought for myself, and I had won. And while the future would still hold challenges, one thing was certain: no one, not even a golden child, could ever underestimate Maddie Harper again, Ev, and though Ethan had been humbled, I knew the fight wasn't truly over. Arrogance is hard to erase, and he still thought he could manipulate situations behind my back. The vineyard was stabilized, yes, but the next step was to secure the family legacy so nothing, or no one, could jeopardize it again. I began by reviewing every single contract Ethan had signed, every deal he had made without my parents' knowledge. The deeper I dug, the more reckless I discovered his actions had been. Some suppliers had been paid late, some deals signed under questionable terms, and a few had clauses that could have caused legal nightmares. It was shocking and terrifying, but also a perfect opportunity. The more evidence I had, the stronger my position, and the clearer the truth would become. I continued to work closely with Jonathan Pierce, our family lawyer, to explore legal measures that would prevent any further mismanagement. He suggested we implement checks and balances, including co-signature requirements for large transactions and regular audits. I was determined to ensure Ethan could never hide behind charm or favoritism again. Meanwhile, Ethan started subtly testing boundaries. He would linger in offices, hover around key meetings, and try to charm the staff with empty apologies. I ignored him, letting his desperation become visible. Staff members, once loyal to him out of fear, began quietly siding with me. Each small act of defiance on his part only revealed how much he had underestimated me. Then came the breaking point. One morning, Natalie came running to my office, holding a stack of emails she had intercepted. "Maddie, look at this," she whispered urgently. Ethan had been secretly negotiating a sale of a portion of the vineyard to an outside investor, without consulting anyone. The sale would have effectively stripped the family of control. This wasn't just reckless. It was a betrayal, and he clearly thought he could sneak it past us. I felt a surge of anger. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. I printed every email, every note, and every record of his attempts to undermine the vineyard. I had the evidence, and this time there would be no charm, no lies, no manipulation. Ethan would face the consequences. Later that day, I called a formal family meeting. Dad, Mom, and Ethan gathered, unaware of the documents I had prepared. I began calmly, outlining the vineyard's progress, the steps taken to repair Ethan's damage, and the remaining vulnerabilities. And then I laid out his secret deals and email correspondence. The room went silent. Ethan's confident smirk faltered, replaced by panic. He tried to explain, to charm, to plead, but I had anticipated it all. "Ethan," I said firmly, "you've had every opportunity to manage responsibly. You've made your choices, and now the vineyard, our family, and our legacy are at risk. You cannot continue this behavior." Dad's eyes were wide. Elizabeth's hands trembled. Ethan's face turned red. And for the first time, he realized he was cornered. With no allies, no excuses, and no charm left to protect him. Jonathan Pierce stepped in, calmly explaining the legal steps we could take to prevent any future unilateral decisions by Ethan. Contracts would be modified, transactions monitored, and any further attempt at mismanagement would have immediate consequences. It was the final nail in the coffin. After the meeting, Ethan retreated, silent and defeated. He knew he had lost, not just control, but credibility, trust, and respect. My parents turned to me, finally seeing the effort, intelligence, and strategy I had put in to save the vineyard. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked sibling. I was Maddie Harper, the one who had taken charge, corrected the mistakes, and ensured the family's legacy was intact. That night, I walked through the vineyard again. The rows of grapevines glistened in the moonlight, and I felt a sense of calm and pride. The battle had been intense, but I had not just survived it. I had won. And while Ethan's arrogance had cost him his golden child immunity, I knew that vigilance would always be necessary. I wasn't done yet. There were still small details to fix, allies to rally, and strategies to implement. But the vineyard, the family, and I had reached a turning point. And for the first time in my life, I felt fully in control, not just of the vineyard, but of my family, my legacy, and my own destiny. Ethan thought he could still manipulate the situation, but I had prepared for this. He underestimated me at every turn, believing charm and arrogance could mask months of recklessness. But I wasn't just planning to confront him privately anymore. I was going public. Not for revenge alone, but to protect the vineyard, employees, and our family name. The first step was transparency. I organized a meeting with investors, staff, and key partners. Natalie helped coordinate everything, ensuring that the meeting would reveal the truth without giving Ethan a chance to spin it. When everyone gathered in the main hall of the vineyard, Ethan swaggered in, confident as ever. Expecting applause or admiration, I started calmly, outlining the vineyard's history, its successes, and the steps I had taken to stabilize operations. I spoke about financial growth, staff morale, and the improvements made since taking a more active role. Everyone listened attentively. Ethan, meanwhile, was shifting nervously in his seat, a rare break in his composed exterior. Then came the moment that would expose him completely. I revealed the evidence of mismanagement, the forged contracts, missing funds, secret investor deals, and employee testimonies. I displayed spreadsheets and emails in clear chronological order, showing exactly how Ethan had jeopardized the vineyard. The room was silent, eyes wide, murmurs growing as the reality sank in. Ethan tried to interject, but I held up my hand, refusing to let him speak. "No excuses," I said firmly. "No charm. This is exactly what has happened under your management. And it ends today." For the first time, Ethan's usual confidence faltered. The golden child, who had always been untouchable in the eyes of our parents and community, was exposed. My parents sat in stunned silence. For weeks, they had refused to acknowledge the depth of Ethan's mismanagement. Now, with clear evidence and staff backing, they had no choice. I could see pride mixed with guilt in Dad's eyes and a quiet relief in Mom's. They finally understood the truth, that I had been right all along. The investors, once swayed by Ethan's charm, were also shaken. They asked questions, scrutinized every detail, and confirmed that the vineyard's operations had indeed been jeopardized. The employees, many of whom had feared retaliation, nodded in agreement with the testimonies Natalie had gathered. The room had shifted. Power dynamics had changed. Ethan's face went pale. He attempted excuses, explanations, anything to regain control, but it was too late. His credibility was gone, and the truth couldn't be rewritten. I had not only saved the vineyard, but also restored its reputation. He could no longer rely on favoritism or charm to protect himself. After the meeting, I met privately with my parents. "I did this for the vineyard, yes," I said softly, "but also for our family and for myself. We can't allow favoritism to blind us again." Dad nodded slowly, eyes heavy with realization. "You've done more than I ever imagined, Maddie. We see you now." That night, I walked the vineyard under the moonlight, the cool breeze rustling through the leaves. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of true accomplishment. Ethan's reign of reckless charm was over, and the vineyard and my family was finally safe. But deep down, I knew the final chapter hadn't yet been written. Ethan would have to face the full consequences of his actions. And I was ready to ensure that the golden child understood once and for all that every choice has a price. Tehe days after the investor meeting were tense. Ethan stayed mostly in his room, brooding, occasionally trying to make small gestures of charm toward our parents, but they no longer responded the way he expected. I could see the golden child's armor cracking piece by piece. The vineyard was safe, the staff loyal, and the community aware. But the final step had to be more than proof. It had to be consequence. I consulted Jonathan Pierce again, going over the legal aspects. Contracts had been corrected, financial oversight implemented, and safeguards established. But I wanted Ethan to truly understand the impact of his recklessness. We drafted a plan to reassign responsibilities, making it clear that leadership and accountability would no longer be optional privileges earned through charm or favoritism. That evening, I called a family meeting. The air was thick with tension. Ethan sat with folded arms, clearly annoyed but hiding it behind a forced calm. My parents looked nervous, glancing between him and me. I spoke slowly, deliberately. "Ethan," I began, "this family has always been about legacy, hard work, and responsibility. You've had opportunities, trust, and freedom, and you've failed to manage them. The vineyard's reputation, our employees, and our family name have all been compromised. It's time for accountability." He tried to interrupt, tried to deflect blame, but I held up a hand. "No, this is about facing the consequences. You will no longer have independent control of the vineyard. All major decisions will require approval, and your management privileges are limited until further notice." Dad finally spoke, his voice shaking slightly. "Maddie, you've done what we should have done years ago. I see now that we favored the wrong child." Ethan's face went red with embarrassment and fury. "You're overreacting," he shouted. "I know what I'm doing." "No, Ethan," I said firmly. "You don't. And now everyone sees the truth." The staff who had gathered, previously silent witnesses, nodded. Employees who had been loyal to Ethan out of fear felt vindicated. Natalie, quietly standing beside me, offered a reassuring smile. I felt a wave of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been building toward. Over the next few weeks, I personally oversaw all major operations. Ethan tried subtle manipulations, suggesting new deals or quietly bypassing protocols. Each attempt was caught and corrected. Slowly, his influence waned, replaced by structure, responsibility, and accountability. My parents began to rely on me for guidance, their respect finally aligning with the work and insight I had always contributed. It wasn't easy watching Ethan struggle. There was guilt mixed with triumph. But I knew this was necessary. Sometimes people need to hit the lowest point before they understand the consequences of their actions. Ethan would never again be the untouchable golden child, and the vineyard and our family would be stronger for it. One night, after the staff had left and the vineyard was quiet, I walked through the rows of grapevines under the moonlight. The air smelled of earth, grapes, and renewal. I realized something important. This victory wasn't just about revenge or exposing Ethan. It was about establishing balance, fairness, and respect. It was about proving that diligence, honesty, and courage matter more than charm, favoritism, and arrogance. As I stood there, the cool breeze rustling the leaves, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known for years. The golden child had been humbled. The vineyard was safe, and I, Maddie Harper, had finally claimed my place, not just as a sibling, but as a leader, protector, and rightful guardian of our family legacy. But the story wasn't over yet. There was one final step, ensuring that Ethan understood the full weight of his choices, and that no one, ever again, would underestimate Maddie Harper. The morning light over the vineyard felt different that day. Crisp, golden, and full of promise. I walked along the rows, taking in the sight of thriving vines, employees busy and smiling, and a sense of balance finally restored. The past months had been a storm of betrayal, manipulation, and reckoning, but now there was clarity. Ethan was in the house, quiet, subdued, and for the first time, reflective. He avoided my gaze, knowing that his charm, arrogance, and golden child status were gone. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. The victory wasn't mine for show. It was mine for proof, for justice, and for safeguarding the vineyard and my family. I called another family meeting, this time, not for confrontation but for resolution. Dad, Mom, and even Ethan sat at the long table, the sunlight streaming through the windows. I began calmly explaining the steps we had taken, the corrections implemented, and the vineyard's secure status. I acknowledged the hard work of the staff and Natalie, who had supported me through the ordeal. Then I turned to Ethan. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about lessons learned. You were reckless, careless, and favored, but the vineyard and this family has been given a second chance. You need to understand the weight of your choices. Ethan nodded, silent, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt, shame, and something resembling respect. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The truth had been delivered and he had absorbed it. My parents looked at me with pride, their expressions finally aligned with the reality they had ignored for so long. Over the next days, I oversaw the vineyard's operations fully, with Ethan in a subordinate role, learning accountability firsthand. My parents finally treated me as an equal partner, listening to my advice and trusting my judgment. The vineyard flourished under this balance. Employees felt secure, and the golden child learned humility. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the porch overlooking the vineyard, Natalie beside me. "You did it, Maddie," she said softly. "You changed everything. The vineyard, the family, even Ethan." I smiled, exhausted but fulfilled. It wasn't easy, but it had to be done. Someone had to protect what's ours. Someone had to be responsible. And that someone was me. For the first time, I felt a sense of completeness. The vineyard was safe, the family dynamic corrected, and my own place within it fully recognized. Ethan had learned his lessons. My parents had finally seen me for who I truly was. And I had proven to myself that courage, diligence, and determination always outweigh charm, favoritism, and arrogance. The moon rose over the vineyard, silver light spilling across the rows of grapes. I breathed deeply, feeling the calm after the storm, the peace after the struggle, and the pride of victory, not through revenge alone, but through justice, fairness, and unwavering resolve. Maddie Harper had reclaimed her legacy, and the golden child would never forget the lesson that sometimes the overlooked one is the strongest of all. If you love stories of revenge, family drama, and shocking secrets, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't miss the next shocking reveal.